Steve D'Antonio here, and welcome to Gearhead. In these sessions, I'll talk about a variety of tools, equipment, and techniques that are relevant to boat owners and folks in the marine industry. Today, I'd like to talk about two of my favorite tools. As somebody who started out as a marine electrician in this industry, I've developed some passion, let's say, or strong beliefs in the type of tools that I like to use as an electrician. One of those is a manual stripping tool, which is what this is. Gives you the ability to strip insulation off of wires. It's compact. It's one of the reasons I like this. It can fit into a relatively small area. If you're working under a dashboard or behind an electrical panel, you're able to get in there with this tool. One of the critical aspects of this is it does all of the sort of business end of its work forward of the pivot point, so that the stripping is occurring in the jaws up here, and that allows you to sort of carefully control the tension that you put on these. It's got some other features too. It's able to cut some small sized or small diameter fasteners by inserting them into these threaded holes and then working the jaw, so you can cut off some small fasteners to set them up to custom lengths if you need to. Now, this is also a crimping tool, but I would say I would only use that in an emergency. This is not the type of crimping tool that I like, primarily because the crimping action is taking place on what I would consider to be the wrong side of the pivot back here. It's sort of awkward to work with this. And again, in an emergency, you might use the crimping component of this. But generally, this is a tool that is designed for stripping, and it does that really well. Now, on the subject of stripping wire, this is a automatic wire stripper. So this is a wire stripper that you can insert a wire into. It's spring-loaded. You squeeze it, and it'll strip off the insulation of the wire. This is very handy. This is sort of a second or third generation of this tool. These first came out about 25 years ago, and I owned one back then. The jaws were rather fragile and tended to break. That is not the case with this style. Again, this second or third generation automatic stripping tool is very robust. I have used this for hundreds of strips with no failures. So it's a very handy tool to have. It is capable of stripping individual wires as well as the jacket off of a multi-conductor, typically a flat cable as well, and it's really handy for that. Another type of crimping tool that might be available to folks who are doing this kind of work is an automatic, or sometimes it's called a ratcheting crimping tool. This is a crimping tool that relies less on the judgment of the user or experience of the user. It sort of takes the guesswork out of how much pressure to put on a solderless connector or crimp, because you can't release it until the crimp cycle has completed. And when it has completed, you know that it's put enough pressure on that terminal to compress it to the right degree. It is also a double-stage crimp, which means that it can crimp two-stage solderless connectors. These are the type of connector that crimps both the conductor as well as the insulation for strain relief. So it does both of those at the same time. If you're crimping with the manual tool, you have to crimp each one of those individually. The conductor crimp as well as the insulation strain relief crimp. This does it at the same time. So why wouldn't you use this every time? I will say that this is not my go-to crimping tool, but I do recommend it for folks who don't do a lot of crimps, because again, you really don't have to know how much pressure to put on the terminal. What sort of bothers me about it a little bit is it's bulky. And if you're working in a small area, once again, behind an electrical panel, behind a dashboard, trying to work this sometimes in that area can be a bit challenging. If that doesn't bother you, or if that's not an issue, by all means go ahead and use it. And the fact that it does two-stage crimps in one shot is a time saver and an advantage. Now, the final tool that I'll talk about that's related to wire stripping and crimping is this manual crimping tool. It is, as I said, it's manual. There's nothing automatic about it. It only has one crimping die for each type of solderless connector, so insulated and uninsulated connectors. And it really relies on the judgment and strength of the person doing the crimping to determine how tightly they're being crimped. So I would say it's ideally suited for people who are experienced and crimp a lot of wires. One of the things I like about it is the leverage that it affords. It's a long tool, so the grip portion is significantly far away from the pivot portion, so you got a lot of effort can be applied, or pressure rather can be applied to the crimp as you're crimping it. And it's small, so if you're working in an area that is compact, again behind an electrical panel or under a dashboard, you're able to fit that in there and work on it and affect those crimps fairly easily. So I'll demonstrate some crimps here. Strip that with our automatic stripping tool. This is a single stage crimp, so it does not have the strain relief on the insulation. The first thing I want to check when I'm putting technically these are called solderless connectors, most people call them crimps, so I'll call it a crimp. When I put my crimp on to check my wire length, you can see the wire is a little bit too long here, it's sticking out. That's not good, because if we're putting a screw in there, or this is going over a stud with a nut, it's going to interfere with it. So I'm going to trim that a little bit. Then fit this again. I don't want to peel any of the wires back when I fit this over, so I want to be careful to get all of the strands. And now I can see right there that the wire, the conductor is just barely sticking out of the edge there. That's perfect. That's just the length that I want. The next thing to watch for, if you're using this style of crimping tool, you can see this one says non and insulated. So that die would be for uninsulated crimps. This is an insulated crimp. And that die is for insulated crimps. And you can see the difference in the two. This is a very gentle shaped die. It's kind of just shaped like that. This one is much more aggressive. It's got this little point in here, and then this protrusion here. It really crushes that terminal, which it can do if it's an uninsulated crimping terminal. If it's insulated like this and you crimp it with the non-insulated die, you usually damage this insulation. It'll either crack it or put a big square indentation in it, and then it'll crack later. So be careful to make sure that you are using the right die. I see many terminals, in fact some entire boats, are crimped with the wrong crimping die, that they're using the non-insulated die on the insulated style of crimp. So avoid that mistake. Put the crimp into the correct die, grab the end of the pliers or the crimping tool so that you get the maximum amount of leverage, and then squeeze pretty much as hard as you can. You can't overdo it. And now you can see that the strands have spread out a little bit there, which is exactly what we want. And this is obviously very well compressed. And now I should not be able to pull this off with my hands with reasonable effort. If I can separate these two, then this is a failed crimp. I did something wrong. It's the wrong size crimp. I didn't compress it enough, or it's the wrong die or something. I should not be able to pull that off like that. In this case I can't. That's nice and tight, and there's no issue with it. Now we'll do a multi-stage crimp, and we'll use the ratcheting crimping tool. So I'll strip a little bit of wire here. Let's see, I'll use the manual stripper this time for this. Check my length. That looks right. It's not sticking out too much. Now I'm going to open the ratcheting crimp, and I'm going to put the ratcheting tool rather, and I'm going to put the crimp into the die that has the same color as the insulation on the crimp. So you can see this is blue, that's got a blue dot on it, so I know the die is the correct size. I load it in there and close this just a little bit, just put a little tension on it. Now that's stuck in there, and I can hold the wire in as far as it'll go so that I know it's fully engaged. Once I've done that, I can squeeze this all the way and let it go. So now this has compressed both the conductor area as well as the strain relief area in one crimp. So that's one of the advantages to that, is that I've done both in sort of one fell swoop, and I don't have to do it twice like I would do it if I was using the manual one. I would have to do it there and then again there. There is an advantage to using this two-stage crimping tool, and the ratcheting mechanism, of course, does make sure that you put enough pressure on it.